to talk to me
fraud
and talk
and
over me
non-New York residents
because you don't
getting
want to
paid.
hear what I have to say.
Oh, I'm listening.
So why
Go
don't you
ahead.
just keep your mouth shut?
Oh,
because you
is
showed
that-
up.
is that the way to
you
talk?
showed up. You showed up.
Yeah.
And so you voted for this one
I
big
signed
ugly
on
bill.
to this. You can extend it
A
right now.
permanent extension of massive tax breaks for your billionaire donors.
So 90% of
So
Americans.
they can get a permanent extension.
90% of
but
Americans
working
take the
class
standard
Americans
deduction.
can't.
Now facing something he has always feared, a rebellion inside his own base. And this time, it is not coming from liberals, Democrats, or MSNBC. It is coming from the very heart of conservative media. The same voices that once defended him relentlessly are now turning on him publicly, loudly, and in unmistakably brutal terms. Two major conservative institutions, the Federalist and the Wall Street Journal, both pillars of mainstream MAGA-aligned media, issue damning critiques of Trump within hours of one another. And their message is clear: Trump looks weak, out of touch, and increasingly unable to lead. Sean Davis, co-founder of The Federalist and a longtime loyal Trump defender, unleashed a stunning condemnation of Trump and the Republican Party. Davis has spent years advocating on Fox News and conservative platforms for the Trump agenda, but this weekend, he sounded the alarm. He argued that Republicans have no accomplishments, no plan, and no vision. He called the party directionless and warned that voters have no reason to show up for them in the 2026 midterms. More importantly, he singled out Trump himself, saying Trump looks weak and rudderless because he has no message for the millions of young Americans who cannot afford housing, healthcare, or a path to the middle class. Davis said the party has lost touch with the people it claims to represent, and that unless Republicans wake up, their political nightmare is only beginning. This isn't fringe criticism. The Federalist has been one of the most dogged pro-Trump media institutions in the country. When that voice cracks, it means something inside the movement is breaking. The Journal's editorial board delivered its own blow. Trump floated the idea of sending $2,000 tariff rebate checks to voters, a desperate attempt to soften the fallout from the skyrocketing prices caused by his own tariffs. But the Journal pointed out the obvious contradiction. If Trump's tariffs are helping the economy, why does he need to bribe voters to offset the damage? They argued that Trump is trying to hide the fact that his trade war is raising prices for American families, and that he is now scrambling for political cover as the Supreme Court considers whether his tariff powers are even legal. The classic political gimmick that exposes the weakness of his economic agenda, not the strength of it. These two critiques, coming from two of the most influential conservative media voices in the country, tell a larger story. Trump's support among the Republican base is not collapsing from the outside. It is fracturing from within.
And in days, the government shutdown is finally coming to an end. In a surprise late-night vote, the Senate has just passed a major funding bill to reopen the federal government, breaking through weeks of gridlock that left millions of Americans waiting, worrying, and wondering when help would come. The final vote was 60-40, and that means the bill now heads to the House for final approval before landing on President Trump's desk. 8 Senate Democrats crossed the aisle to vote yes, joining Republicans to pass a new deal, one that could have far-reaching effects, not just for federal workers, but for anyone relying on Social Security, Medicare, or SNAP benefits. Because here's the thing, this isn't just another temporary funding bill. Quiet changes were added in the final hours, and they could directly affect your healthcare costs, your next Social Security check, and even when your food assistance reloads. Inside this new deal, and what it could mean for you in the weeks ahead. The new bill is officially called the Continuing Appropriations Act of 2026, and it funds the government through January 30th of next year. In simple terms, it's a short-term budget that keeps things running at last year's levels while Congress works out the bigger disagreements that caused the shutdown in the first place. But it's not just a copy and paste extension. This version includes several new provisions quietly added in the final round of negotiations. It provides full-year funding for the Department of Veterans Affairs, ensuring medical centers and benefit programs for veterans can continue without disruption. It also includes new money for military construction projects, Capitol Police and congressional security upgrades, and the Department of Agriculture, which manages food safety inspections and SNAP benefits. Another key section reimburses states that use their own emergency funds to keep programs like Medicaid, WIC, and food assistance running during the shutdown. It also authorizes the Treasury to issue back pay to all furloughed federal workers and contractors once the government reopens. So, while this isn't a full-year budget, it's a critical stopgap, a reset button after 40 days of chaos that ensures core services, paychecks, and benefit programs can function again, while Congress fights over the next phase of spending. But here's where things get interesting. This deal wasn't supposed to pass. In fact, for weeks, leaders on both sides were saying it couldn't happen without one key issue being solved: healthcare. So how did it suddenly break through? Let's rewind for a second. Here's how we got here. For over a month, the government has been paralyzed because of a fight over expiring Affordable Care Act subsidies. Air tax credits extended immediately. Republicans said they'd handle that later. And freezing billions in service. Immediate extension of the Affordable Care Act subsidies, one of their main demands throughout the shutdown. Instead, they received a promise from Senate leaders to hold a vote on the issue later this year. It's not a guarantee of passage, but it's a commitment that the healthcare fight isn't over. It's just been delayed until after the government reopens. Full back pay. For many families who've missed 2 pay cycles already, that's life-changing news. But that's just the start, because the biggest changes affect you directly. The programs most Americans depend on, Social Security, Medicare, and food assistance, are all tied to this new funding deal. And depending on where you live, it could change how quickly your benefits restart.